Marcus Thompson had been working as a night janitor at Riverside Elementary School for 6 months, and he thought he'd seen everything the old building could offer. Built in 1952, the school had that peculiar smell of floor wax, cafeteria food, and decades of childhood memories soaked into its walls. But lately, something had changed in the atmosphere. Something that made his skin crawl every time he walked those empty hallways. It started with room 12, Mrs. Henderson's third-grade classroom. Marcus would clean it last during his shift, usually around 2 a.m. when the building was at its most silent. The first time he noticed it, he thought perhaps he'd forgotten to turn off the lights earlier. But the light switch was in the off position, and yet a soft, warm glow emanated from inside the classroom. When he peered through the door's small window, Marcus saw children sitting at their desks, perfectly still, their heads bent over papers as if taking a test. But school had ended 8 hours ago, and the building was locked tight. He fumbled with his keys and opened the door, but the room was empty and dark. The glow had vanished completely. Marcus told himself it was fatigue playing tricks on his mind. Night shifts could mess with anyone's perception, especially in a building as old and creaky as Riverside Elementary. But the incidents continued and escalated with each passing week. The next occurrence happened in the gymnasium. Marcus was mopping the polished floor when he heard the unmistakable sound of children playing. Laughter, the squeak of sneakers on wood, the bounce of basketballs. He looked up from his mop bucket to see translucent figures running across the court, playing an eternal game that cast no shadows. Their movements were jerky. Some children appeared to be missing limbs, others had their heads tilted at impossible angles. They all wore clothing from different decades, 1950s dresses, 1970s bell-bottoms, modern athletic wear, as if Marcus dropped his mop and ran, but their laughter followed him down the hallway, echoing off the walls like a twisted symphony. The school's principal, Dr. Matthews, dismissed Marcus's reports with bureaucratic indifference. "Old buildings make strange sounds, Marcus. Pipes settling, heating systems adjusting. You're doing important work, but don't let your imagination run wild." But Marcus knew what he experienced wasn't imagination. He began researching the school's history, spending his lunch breaks at the public library, digging through old newspaper archives and city records. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Riverside Elementary had been built on the site of the old Riverside Children's Home, an orphanage that operated from 1923 to 1951. The orphanage had been shut down after a devastating fire that killed 37 children and 4 staff members. The fire had started in the middle of the night, and by the time firefighters arrived, the building was completely engulfed. The newspaper reports were horrifying. Children trapped in locked dormitories, unable to escape. Staff members who abandoned their posts to save themselves. Investigators later discovered that the orphanage had been overcrowded, understaffed, and operating with numerous safety violations that had been ignored by corrupt city officials. Marcus realized that room 12 had been built directly over the orphanage's main dormitory, where most of the children had died. The gymnasium occupied the exact spot where the fire had started. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus returned to work that night with a new understanding of what he was witnessing. These weren't random supernatural occurrences. They were the trapped souls of children who had never received proper burials, never been mourned, never been remembered. At 3 a.m., Marcus walked deliberately to room 12. The warm glow was there again, brighter than ever. Through the window, he could see dozens of children at their desks, but now they were looking directly at him with hollow, pleading eyes. He opened the door and stepped inside. "I know who you are," Marcus said softly. "I know what happened to you." The children's ghostly forms became clearer, more solid. They ranged in age from 5 to 16, all wearing the simple clothing of orphans from a bygone era. Burns covered their small bodies, and their eyes held the pain of abandonment and terror. One little girl, no more than 6 years old, stood up from her desk and approached Marcus. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through dead leaves. "We've been waiting so long for someone to remember us," she whispered. "They buried our bodies in unmarked graves. No one knows our names. No one mourns for us." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. "What do you want from me?" "Tell our story," another child said. A boy with half his face burned away. "Make them remember. Make them care." Marcus nodded, understanding his purpose now. But as he turned to leave, the little girl grabbed his sleeve with fingers that felt like ice. "You can't leave yet," she said, her voice changing, becoming hungrier. "We've been so lonely for so long. Stay with us, teach us, play with us." The classroom door slammed shut behind Marcus. The lights flickered and died. In the darkness, he heard the sound of matches being struck, saw small flames appearing around the room. The children began to giggle, but it wasn't the innocent laughter of youth. It was the sound of souls driven mad by decades of isolation and pain. "Now you'll never leave us," they chanted in unison. "Now you'll burn with us forever." As the supernatural flames engulfed the room, Marcus realized he'd become the latest addition to their eternal classroom in the dead of night. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to hear more chilling stories. The clock struck 3:33 a.m. when Jessica's eyes snapped open like a trap. Something had woken her from deep sleep, but she couldn't identify what. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and her husband Mark's steady breathing beside her. She lay completely still, listening intently, waiting for her racing heart to calm down and return to normal rhythm. That's when she heard it. The soft, deliberate patter of bare footsteps in the hallway outside their bedroom door. Jessica's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Their 2 children, Emma and Lucas, were spending the weekend at her mother's house 3 towns over. Mark was right beside her, lost in deep sleep after working a double shift. They lived in a single-story ranch house with no pets, no roommates, no one else who could possibly be walking around their home in the dead of night. The footsteps were small and light, like those of a young child, and they moved with strange purpose down the carpeted hallway toward the kitchen. Jessica nudged Mark awake with trembling hands, whispering urgently in his ear. "Mark, wake up right now. Someone's in our house." Mark groaned and rolled over, barely conscious, his voice thick with sleep. What are you talking about, Jess?" "Listen carefully," she hissed, gripping his arm. They both lay frozen like statues, straining their ears in the suffocating darkness. The footsteps had stopped completely, but now they could hear something infinitely worse. The distinct sound of cabinet doors opening and closing in the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable clink of dishes and silverware being moved around deliberately. Mark grabbed the aluminum baseball bat that he kept under their bed for exactly this kind of situation, and crept toward their bedroom door with practiced stealth. Jessica followed close behind, her smartphone ready to call 911, though her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold it. The hallway stretched before them like a tunnel, illuminated only by the faint green glow of their digital clock numbers reflecting off the cream-colored walls. As they approached the kitchen, they could see a soft, warm light emanating from inside, as if someone had opened the refrigerator door.
Mark raised the bat above his shoulder and stepped into the kitchen, ready to confront the intruder. What he saw made him drop the weapon with a loud clatter. A small figure stood with its back to them, barely reaching the counter height. It wore a white nightgown that seemed to glow in the refrigerator light. Long, dark hair hung down its back like a curtain. The figure was methodically removing items from their refrigerator and placing them on the counter in perfect rows. "Emma," Jessica whispered, confused. "Honey, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at Grandma's." The figure stopped moving, but didn't turn around. The kitchen fell into absolute silence. "Emma, baby, turn around and talk to Mommy." Slowly, impossibly slowly, the figure began to turn. As it rotated, Jessica realized with mounting horror that this wasn't her daughter. The nightgown was yellowed and tattered like something from decades past. The hair was matted and dirty, hanging in greasy strands. When the figure completed its turn, Jessica screamed. Where a face should have been, there was only smooth white skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just blank, featureless flesh stretched tight over bone. The thing tilted its head at an unnatural angle, as if listening to something they couldn't hear. Mark grabbed Jessica's hand and they ran toward the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The deadbolt was locked, but the key was missing. The windows were sealed shut, though they'd been open earlier that evening for the cool breeze. Behind them, they heard the soft footsteps following, accompanied by a new sound, humming. A child's voice humming a lullaby, but the melody was wrong, distorted, as if played backwards. They ran to their bedroom and barricaded the door with their dresser. Jessica called 911, but the line was dead. Mark tried his phone, no signal, though they had had perfect reception all day. The humming grew louder, closer. The footsteps stopped right outside their bedroom door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 gentle taps like a child asking permission to enter. "Mommy? Daddy, why won't you let me come home?" The voice was Emma's, but wrong somehow. Too hollow, too echoing, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Jessica looked at Mark with tears streaming down her face. "That's not our daughter." "Mommy, I've been waiting so long to come home. I've been so cold and lonely." Mark checked his phone again, still no signal. He looked out the bedroom window and saw something that made his stomach drop. Every house in the neighborhood was dark, completely abandoned. No cars in driveways, no lights anywhere. It was as if they were the only people left in the world. "I found your house, Mommy. I followed the other children's voices. They told me you were here." Other children? Jessica pressed her ear to the door and heard them. Dozens of young voices humming that same distorted lullaby, getting closer with each passing moment. "We just want to come home, Mommy. We've been looking for so long." The doorknob began to turn slowly, though they'd locked it. The humming grew louder, more voices joining the chorus. Children who would never grow up, never leave, never stop looking for a home that no longer existed. As the door creaked open, Jessica realized the terrible truth. They weren't being visited by something supernatural. They had somehow crossed over into a place where lost children gathered, where families were reunited in ways that defied understanding. The last thing Jessica saw before the darkness claimed them was dozens of faceless children reaching out with pale, cold hands, welcoming them to their eternal family reunion in the dead of night. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to hear more chilling stories. 16-year-old Amanda Chen had been babysitting for the Morrison family for over a year, and she'd always felt comfortable in their beautiful suburban home. The children, 8-year-old Sophie and 5-year-old Jake, were well-behaved and usually went to bed without any fuss. But tonight felt different from the moment Mr. and Mrs. Morrison left for their anniversary dinner.
The children had been unusually quiet during the evening, spending most of their time coloring in the living room while Amanda caught up on homework at the kitchen table. When bedtime arrived at 8 p.m., they went upstairs without their usual protests or requests for extra stories. Amanda settled into the comfortable leather couch with her psychology textbook, grateful for the peaceful evening. The Morrison house was spacious and modern, with large windows that offered views of the perfectly manicured neighborhood. Everything about the place radiated safety and normalcy. At 10:30 p.m., she heard movement upstairs. Soft footsteps in the hallway, followed by whispered conversations. Amanda assumed the children were having trouble sleeping and decided to check on them. She climbed the carpeted stairs, noting how the house seemed to creak more than usual in the nighttime quiet. Sophie's room was first. Amanda gently pushed open the door and peered inside. The little girl was fast asleep, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like spun gold, her breathing deep and even. Jake's room was next. He too was sleeping soundly, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Confused, Amanda returned downstairs. She must have imagined the sounds. Old houses made noise, especially at night when they settled and adjusted to temperature changes. But at 11:15 p.m., she heard it again. This time the footsteps were more pronounced, moving back and forth in the upstairs hallway like someone pacing nervously. Amanda muted the television and listened carefully. The sounds were definitely real, measured steps that paused occasionally, as if someone was stopping to look at something. Amanda climbed the stairs again, more cautiously this time. The hallway was empty, but both children's doors were now wide open. She was certain she'd closed them earlier. Sophie and Jake were still sleeping peacefully, but something felt wrong about the scene. The shadows in their rooms seemed deeper, more substantial. As she stood in the hallway, Amanda noticed something that made her stomach drop. There were wet footprints on the carpet, leading from Jake's room to Sophie's room and back again. Small footprints like those of a child, but they were muddy and left dark stains on the beige carpet. None of the children had been outside today. It had been raining heavily and they'd spent the entire afternoon indoors. Amanda followed the footprints with growing dread. They led to the end of the hallway, where a small door opened into the attic storage space. The door was ajar, though she was certain it had been closed when she'd toured the house months ago. Cold air drifted down from the attic opening, carrying a smell that made Amanda gag. Something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Don't go in the attic. Come downstairs now." Amanda's hands shook as she typed back, "Who is this?" "A friend. The children upstairs aren't Sophie and Jake. Look at their eyes." Amanda ran back to Sophie's room and knelt beside the bed. In the dim light from the hallway, she studied the sleeping child's face. Something was terribly wrong. Sophie's eyes were open, staring directly at her, but they were completely black.
No whites, no pupils, just endless darkness that seemed to swallow light. Jake's eyes were the same, open, aware, but inhuman. Another text arrived. "They died 3 months ago. Check the basement." Amanda's entire body began to shake uncontrollably. She remembered Mrs. Morrison mentioning that the children had been sick recently, some kind of flu that had kept them home from school for several weeks, but they'd recovered, hadn't they? Against every instinct, screaming at her to run, Amanda crept downstairs to the basement door. The wooden steps creaked ominously under her weight as she descended into the cool darkness below. She found the light switch and illuminated the finished basement with its comfortable furniture and children's play area. In the corner, partially hidden behind the water heater, were 2 small bodies. Sophie and Jake Morrison, their skin gray and mottled, their eyes sunken into dark sockets. They'd been dead for months, their bodies preserved by the cool basement temperature. Amanda screamed and stumbled backward, but strong hands grabbed her from behind. She spun around to see Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes the same endless black as the things upstairs. "We couldn't let them go," Mrs. Morrison said, in a voice that echoed strangely. "We love them too much, so we found a way to bring them back, to keep them with us forever." "But they needed someone to take care of them during their transition," Mr. Morrison added, his mouth stretching into an unnatural smile. "Someone young and full of life to help them remember what it feels like to be alive." Amanda tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey her commands. Looking down, she saw that her feet were sinking into the basement floor as if it were quicksand. The concrete was pulling her down, claiming her. "Don't fight it, dear," Mrs. Morrison said gently. "You'll be so much happier once you join our family. The children have grown quite fond of you over the past year. They specifically requested that you stay with them permanently." As Amanda sank deeper into the floor, she heard the soft patter of footsteps on the stairs. The things that looked like Sophie and Jake descended towards her, their black eyes gleaming with hunger, their mouths opening to reveal rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. "Welcome to our family, Amanda," they said in unison, their voices like the rustle of dead leaves. "Now you can take care of us forever and ever." The last thing Amanda saw before the basement floor closed over her head was the Morrison family standing together, holding hands, their eyes reflecting nothing but an abyss that had swallowed their humanity whole. Above ground, her car remained parked in the driveway, her textbooks still open on the kitchen table, as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. The Morrisons would need a new babysitter soon, and they already had their next candidate picked out. After all, their children were so very hard to please.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.